Bryan Burney has been working with some of the top professional athletes in the world throughout the past few years. Bryan specializes in branding and all-field partnerships for high-profile clients, including Micah Parsons, Jordan Love, and Bijan Robinson. He helps build personal brands and secure endorsements for these players as well. Bryan will explain what it is like to work with some of the best athletes in the world, and we'll talk about the hard work that goes into this highly important job for sports and media. So you've worked with some of the top athletes throughout the country and the world over the last few years. What is it like to work with some of them in each and every day?
It's kind of cliche, right? But you learn pretty quickly that, especially the guys I work with, they're young, right? They're just at the end of the day, they're young men that are just significantly gifted and beyond the 1%. But at the end of the day, like they're just kind of figuring stuff out, just like the rest of us, And I think that's the one thing that probably the fans and the general public probably doesn't realize about these guys is that they have feelings, they have emotions, they have egos, they have they have the same senses that the rest of us have. So I think that's the biggest thing that's probably misguided, just because they're money and talent doesn't make the emotions of going from a child to an adult be any different.
How did you decide that this ultimately would be the career for you?
I always knew I wanted to work in sports. And I always, even as a kid, enjoyed the marketing side of things, whether it was commercials in big sporting events or, promotion of within sports. Like I've always loved sports, played sports. Just realized probably in my late teen years that sports weren't going to be outside of intramural, were not going to be a major part of my life anymore. So I started. I didn't have the upbringing or background to really know a lot about corporate America or sports business for that matter. So I really spent a lot of my late teen years just kind of exploring what different things, what different options are out there in sports. So I always had that, direction that I wanted to go in. And then once I started learning a little bit more about the business, about sports business in general, I took a few steps before I got to where I am today. I started on the television ad sales side of sports business, and then that eventually evolved into working with athletes. And I think the biggest thing was now at that point, after like looking back on the last 20 years, I've had a pretty balanced amount of time spent on the TV ad sales side to the working with athletes side. And I knew the athlete part was something that I really enjoyed more because there's just a lot more different gratification. You're working on with people, you're working with humans involved. And even though in ad sales, there's people involved, but you're selling space, right? Where in this situation that I've been in over the last decade, I'm creating partnerships for athletes that can last for their entire lives. So it's just a much different emotion and gratification that you get from that. And I realized pretty early on in working with Deshaun Watson, actually, where we were developing relationships with people together. And I watched, kind of the excitement of him being paid to do these different things. It's just a much different emotion than working at an ESPN or a CBS.
So what work goes into your job day to day?
Every day's a little different because I feel like when you're kind of playing both sides, where I have an obligation to be available for my clients, but then I also have an obligation to be talking to new brands, talking to new brand partners, catering to their existing brand partners as well. So like every day could be a little different, especially depending on the time of year. Like right now is a little, for football players specifically, is a little bit of a quiet time where they may be doing some working out with their personal trainer or something like that, but for the most part, they're just kind of hanging out, and got a little time till they need to get ready for, OTAs and stuff like that. So these days are more brand focused, and I'm trying to use that time as much as I can to be speaking with the companies that we work with or speaking with new companies, having an understanding what's going on out there in the business from like who's doing new partnerships. So now this is a lot of the time where I can network, I can meet more people, But then once you get into kind of that late spring post NFL draft, that's when a lot of these brands want to do their shoots. So now I'm kind of flying all over the place to be, be present for the guys that, as some of these brand partnerships and these conversations that we're having come to fruition.
So could you talk a little bit about the difference between the sports and what really goes into each different side of the two games?
Sure. Sorry, explain that. Like
Like
when you say this side of two games.
what really is the major differences between, football and baseball and those athletes?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, man. I learned pretty quickly. Totally different. Baseball players, game days just not. I don't. I don't want to be misquoted and say their jobs are easy, because by no means they're not. But baseball players, game day starts to become a norm for them in the season. Like there's a game almost every day. So if I'm like, hey Vladdy, we'd like to do this shoot for Uber Eats. A lot of times guys will be like, hey, I'll just knock it out in the morning before I go to the stadium for batting practice, where a football player, as you know, being a sports fan, like on game day, forget it. Like those guys are in a whole different zone, a whole different element. I wouldn't even, I probably won't even bother a client when it comes to brand partnerships in the football side after Thursday, to be honest, in season. Football is just such a drastic different commitment for players. You play your game on Sunday, right? And then Monday, depending if it's later in the year, you're probably getting PT, like your body's not even ready to practice yet. Then Tuesday is the official NFL off day, but most quarterbacks and you're very committed, players, they're going to at least work out in the morning, they're going to watch film. So the day really doesn't really end till like 1 o'clock. So it's not a free day by any stretch. And then boom, Wednesday, Thursday, you're in full days of practice. Friday's your walkthrough, and Saturday, if you're on the road, you're traveling. So business needs in football are definitely not being addressed in season. Now we will stuff goes live. Guys make social posts. There's charitable things guys can do during the week, but as far as like, it's pretty rare where you're doing a big shoot in season just because of the strenuous of the NFL schedule. Now the beauty is the schedule is not very long, right? So it gives you a very big off season to get a lot of work done. Where on the baseball side, the off season, if you take like Vladdy Jr., like his season didn't end until Halloween. He had about a month off, 2 months off, and then come January, most ball players, especially the great ones, like they're already probably back in their spring training city by mid-January. So baseball, you just don't have the same off season, but in season, they play 162 games. Knocking something out on a Tuesday when they have a 7 p.m. game at 10 a.m. is just not. It's not frowned upon. It's very normal actually. Where in football, if I was doing a shoot with Jordan Love on a Friday before a game, like A, Jordan wouldn't do that. B, they'd look at me like I was out of my mind. So it's just such a different culture on a in season.
So I know you said that you started off a lot with TV ad sales, but what did it ultimately take for you to find yourself where you are today?
Yeah, man. Like one thing that anyone that says like, "Oh, I made it by myself and I had no help," like that's crazy. That's not true. I don't. Anyone that says that is probably not being totally honest with themselves. I think in sports, like it's not it's not the smartest guy in the classroom. It's the more likable guy in the classroom is probably more likely going to succeed than the smartest guy. And I say that because it's a relationship business still. I mean, data and analytics and things like that have become more and more prevalent, but it's still pretty relationship driven. I mean, you need the players, right? You need the top players to do deals. No one does deals with bench players, unfortunately. But my point is, people get comfortable with you, and they develop a rapport with you, and they know that you're going to deliver. They know that you talk to your clients directly. You're not communicating through a third party. And when you say you're going to be somewhere, you're going to be somewhere. And I think that is the biggest thing, is just being consistent and constantly meeting new people. Like one thing I learned when I left TV and did media sales, so to speak. TV sounds a little archaic, I guess, at this point. And went into talent. One thing I learned right away is meet everybody. Anybody that is connected to something that may be of interest. Like I have coffee tomorrow with Kyle Rudolph. I don't even know if you know who Kyle Rudolph is. He played tight end in the NFL for a long time. He's probably, I think he's probably in the Hall of Fame discussion for sure. Kyle now works. He owns a company that does fundraising campaigns for foundations. I'm gonna meet with Kyle tomorrow for a cup of coffee here in Tampa. If I worked in TV ad sales, like outside of being a fan, there'd be zero reason to meet with Kyle Rudolph. So what I love about what I do, well, I say now, but it's been over 10 years, is you're just always meeting new people. It could be people in the finance world. It could be people in the brand world. It could be a guy that works at Rolls Royce. Like anything that's of value to my athletes, I'm gonna take the meeting. It could be it could be a Rolex dealer for that matter, and I could save my guys on future purchases. So I've kind of developed myself into trying to be, if I don't know it, I want to know someone that does, so that my clients always have the best service possible. Because one thing I've learned is the bigger stars you work with, the more the job becomes a little more in depth than just traditional transactions.
Do you feel that meeting new people and working with some of these guys has been the best part of your career?
Absolutely. Globally, like we up until the age of 32, I've never been outside of North America before. Um, in the last 10 years, I've been to every continent. I've been to 17 different countries. I've met people all over the world that I do business with now and I have a relationship with now. I had a call with Italy this morning, working on something that is going to bring a bunch of NFL players out to Lake Como to train with the Inter Milan Soccer Club. Like I have to, sometimes I have to take a, just kind of a pause for a minute and just kind of think about what I'm doing because things go so fast. And as you know, as a fan of the NFL, like the stardom of these guys happens overnight, right? Like Bijan Robinson last year was very popular. This year, he's a superstar, and you see it at events, right? You'll go to Super Bowl. Next thing you know, I'm getting text messages from people I don't even know. Hey, bring Micah to this event tonight. Everyone wants him there. Where 2 years ago, I was probably calling these people, hey, can I bring Micah? Yeah, of course. He was, don't get me wrong, he was rookie of the year, right? But now he's like a mainstay, right? He's a 3-time All-Pro. And that's stuff, and that's what I find fascinating about football. Baseball is like a longevity thing, where football, you become a star after one season. CJ Stroud's a good example of that. One rookie of the year, the guy was on top of the world, and then how football is. It's up and down. Teams change, things change, and next thing you know, there's a new flavor of the year, and that you get guys that start to be real consistent, and the relationships that come from that are immeasurable because you just never know. One day you're talking to one of the biggest franchise, fast food retailers in the world, and then next thing you know, I'm talking to the ambassador of Italy to bring NFL players because now it's becoming such a global game to bring NFL players out there and different marketing opportunities. I'm going to Tokyo at the end of the month with Jordan Love to meet with the CEO of Sony. It's kind of endless. Where 10 years ago in ad sales, I was having success, but your access is within a range, right? It's limited. No, I don't want to use the word limited because I'm very thankful for that time of my career, but there is a cap or a limit on who you really are going to talk to at the end of the day, where even though Toyota's deal with Jordan Love is significantly smaller in the dollar amount than it is what they spent with me when I worked at ESPN. But at ESPN, I never met the CMO of Toyota once. Now that I represent Jordan Love, I've met the CMO 5 times in the last 2 years. Because why? It's a lot. That CMO gets to tell his son or his nephew or whoever, oh, I had Jordan Love at my event. Telling your nephew or your buddies at the golf club, oh, I spent $250 million with ESPN. People are like, well, whatever. It just doesn't hit this. It's just different. It's a different conversation. It's a different emotion, right? I think that's what's big with sales is emotions. You have a much different emotion tied in when a brand is partnering with an individual, with a human being, as opposed to buying an asset or buying a platform.
You've mentioned Jordan Love, Micah Parsons, Bijan Robinson, just to name a few of them. But What goes into recruiting these guys to be able to represent them?
Yeah, man, that's a world that I really started to learn in probably the last 5 years. It's a little more recent for me. David Mulugeta, who I work for, is been the number one agent in Forbes in 24 and 25 for football. I think he's the number one sports agent for 2025, actually. So, I got a little bit of a cheat code, right? I built a really nice relationship with him, and he has seen me as an asset for him as far as recruiting goes, where he walks in a room and is like, yeah, I'm the best agent, but I've also brought on who I feel is the best marketing guy. And we that's the package we're bringing you as a recruit. Now, how do you get there? I've learned from David, man, to be honest with you. There's trainers, you just really never know where a recruit connection could come from. We had a recruiting meeting yesterday that was last minute. This is pretty late in the game now to be recruiting. Combines in 5 weeks. But this was a unique situation where this particular recruit felt that his speed was going to be maybe a little bit of an issue for him in combine, so he hired a speed trainer. Now, that speed trainer we know really well because he's worked with a bunch of our players in the past. He said to the player, hey, who are you meeting with? You don't have an agent yet? Nope. Oh, have you met so-and-so? And next thing you know, we have a meeting next week. So that's one scenario of how you just never really know. I've had other scenarios where there's a financial advisor that nowadays with NIL, these kids are talking to financial advisors and lawyers at 16, 15, 16 years old. We have a kid in Florida right now. He just finished his sophomore year of high school. He was the number one player in the country football-wise. But what's unique about this kid is, we just happened to, through word of mouth, someone they knew asked us if we wanted to meet with the kid, and it was through a coach of a coach. Like these things tend to, and I think, not to be cliche or corny, but that's why you just always got to treat people the same, right? Like, you never know who's going to have an in with somebody, who grew up with who, or went to high school with who, or knows the coach. It really can come from any crevice or corner of the world when it comes to recruiting. There's really nothing. And one thing you got to do as an agent is just trust your sources, right? Trust who you're talking to. I'm like I said, I got a little bit of a step on others as far as how it goes for me in this business. Like, David could call a GM of any team in the league and be like, hey, what do you think of this high school player? What do you think of this college player? As we know, these NFL teams are they invest so much money in recruiting that they're watching a lot of these kids from 10th grade. So these GMs know right away if they think someone's going to be a guy or not. Now, again, they're not always right, so sometimes you have to go with your gut. But David has some tremendous resources on whether it's evaluating talent or getting to talent.
All right, so to wrap it up a little bit here, what advice would you give someone that would be interested in pursuing a career like you have?
Yeah, man, I understand the situation I'm in, and it took me a while to understand that, where I know I'm really fortunate. But I think the one thing that I stayed consistent about, and I tell everybody, like, yo, don't try to execute your dream job right out of college. That's the biggest mistake I think a lot of young people make. Like, take jobs that you think are going to set you up. And I think one of the reasons I would have liked to have gotten where I am today, maybe a little sooner than I did, of course, like anybody, right? No one, things never happen on our own timeline, right? Like, and I think the biggest thing for me was I just never really, I just always was willing and ready to meet with somebody. If I thought someone was doing something that was somewhat in the vicinity of what I wanted to do. Now, again, in my 40s, I'm a little more selective. I'm very comfortable in my job. I'm not looking to go work for a new company anymore because I'm now kind of building my own business within the company. So now I'm more looking to grow my business than like go leave for a new business. But up until my mid 30s, that was not the case. And I just always was willing to meet with whoever. I used my network. And when you use your network, it gets bigger. So, hey, Todd, I know you know so-and-so at Turner in the NBA. I'd love to meet with that guy. Can I get coffee with him? And boom. Then when I met that guy, he might have knew somebody. Hey, would you mind introducing me? Like, you can't be shy, and you can't be, because no one's gonna just offer that. You have to be aggressive about it. You can't be afraid to be a little annoying. Like I always tell people, what do you master the most in this business? It's not getting the best, having the best, degree or going to the fanciest school. It's kind of towing that line of being persistent and not being annoying and just finding that middle ground. And what comes with that is everything I just said in the last couple of minutes is constantly networking, constantly making sure that you're talking to new people, setting small goals for yourself. Like, hey, by the end of next week, I want us to talk to at least 3 different people that work within major sports, whether it's repping talent, working at the league, working at a network. Like sometimes I hear people like, oh, well, hey, I'm going to introduce you to somebody I think would help you. Well, why? He does X, Y, and Z. I'm like, yeah, but he's had a 20-year career in sports. There's things that can relate, and that's what I always try to stress to people. Like, don't limit yourself. You don't have kids yet. You're not married yet. You have nothing but you have to use your time wisely, because as you get older, you're just gonna have less time available to network. Now, I'm really fortunate because in my early 40s, the last 20 years, I was relentless. I met with everybody, anybody, no matter where I was. I was in Chicago. If I knew someone knew somebody at a place that I wanted to meet, I'd call that person. Hey, can you call so and so? I want if they can give me 10 minutes, I'm going to come by their office. And I just constant was consistent about that. And if someone said no or they didn't have time, I didn't waste a lot of time. I just moved on to the next person, and then that I wanted to meet with, and then I just revisit. I just put that person back to the end of the list and be like, cool. I'll try that again next time. And I think that's been the that could go apply to just about anything, not just sports marketing. It could apply to anything you do in life, really. If you want to be in broadcasting, meeting with people that have even if they're not in the sport you want to work in, they've they've they found a way, right? They got to a place where you want to be at your craft. And I think when people get too uberly focused, you start to narrow down your network, and that's the last thing you want to do, especially in your 20s and 30s. Your whole focus should be, all right, this job is really cool. It's going to help me meet these people, and it's going to set up for the next great job. And that's how you have to look at things for in the beginning, where I think people get a little too focused. And, life is short, of course, but you do want to have a long career. And the way to have a long career, I think, is by constantly, keeping, I like to this day, I may not jump on a plane to just go meet with anybody because I have more obligations now, but the way you don't have a lot of time is because you're busy, and the way you get busy is having a lot of people to talk to and work with. And that's something that's happened over the course of the last 15 years. You can't make that up in 2 years. You just got to be consistent.
All right, well, thank you for sharing your stories and some of your knowledge about this. I appreciate you giving me your time.